Board. Stan Mortensen for the record. As the board knows, a few months ago, the board approved Nancy Lee to work back in my office on a temporary basis after her retirement. One of the people she was training already resigned, and another that she's training is going to resign in just a week or two. So basically 2 out of the 3 people she was training have already quit. We've hired one replacement and we're trying to hire another. Long story short, I need to extend her temporary stay in my office. The request does say for 60 to 90 days. After giving this some more thought and talking with Nancy and the people she's training, even if we had all 3 people still in the office and Nancy had hit her 60 days, we may be asking for an extension. And so I think it's better that I ask for up to 180 days, hoping that it only takes 90. I'm just trying to minimize how many times I have to come back before the board. And so I would ask for her to be extended up to 180 days if needed, but our goal would be to do it as soon as possible.
So is this something that we would create a temporary position for? I mean, 100, is that? Okay, so this is just the extension of the temporary position?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, we have some with contracts, and so I want to make sure that this is good. Okay?
And she's set to expire on the 30th, I think.
Okay.
Her
That
position.
sounds, her position.
Wow.
She did retire, but she still has a long life to live. Yeah, her position's set to expire on the 30th, and obviously, because 2 of the 3 people she's training have quit, we need an extension. And again, I'm just trying to minimize how many times I have to come back before the board. So I would amend my request to be up to 180 days. And again, we would seek to make it as fast as possible. But that's just part 1 of my request. Part 2 recognizes the fact that had Nancy stayed in the office and not retired, she would have received a 4.5% COLA, and she would have received step increases to put her at an appropriate step. So if the board does request her extension, I would ask that her pay reflect what she would have received had she not retired. And there's a projection on that. It does appear to be budget neutral. I realize we're at the fiscal year. I would like to point out to the board that I'm short 5 attorneys right now. One way or the other, this is going to be budget neutral because we're not fully staffed. Part 3 of my request is the bonus. As the board knows, bonuses were approved at the last meeting. $1,000 worth of those bonuses will not be distributed because 2 of those people are no longer in my office. I'm simply asking to redistribute that $1,000 to Nancy. Had she stayed, she'd be getting a $1,500 bonus because of her length of stay in my office. And so I'm just trying to incentivize Nancy wanting to stay with us and help us as long as possible. So those are the 3 parts to my request.
Okay.
And if the board feels uncomfortable about giving a temporary employee a $1,000 bonus, there's always the risk that she could take the money and run. If we want to make it contingent on her staying at least 90 days, Nancy's fine not getting the bonus right away. I don't know if that's possible because of the money coming from 1 year and bleeding over to the next, but Nancy recognizes there might be some hesitation with that. She intends on staying at least 90 days. She's fine with the bonus being deferred if it's needed, but I think she's going to stay, so.
Okay. Brandy?
Yeah, Brandy Falcon for the record. It has to be paid in FY23, but what we do with bonuses like that, like the sheriff's office, they have to pay it back if they leave after they get the money. So that's what it would be.
Yeah.
She'd be willing to enter into that agreement.
Okay, and so Darren, you could work on that agreement with Stan and?
Yep, we
Okay.
performed that.
Perfect. Okay. I don't really see any issues. Questions?
No. I think we need to give the prosecuting attorney the tools he needs to get the job done, and clearly with the staffing issues, having someone come out of retirement to help.
And you're lucky to have her.
Yeah.
Tremendously. She was with our office for a long time. Arguably, she's irreplaceable. but she's trying to help us replace her, and the other positions were short. So we are lucky to have her. And I just want to keep her as long as it takes to train our new employees up. So
Okay.
thank you for your consideration.
Do we need to include the pay and the bonus in this?
I would. Yeah,
Okay.
make it
I move that we approve the temporary staffing request of the prosecuting attorney to extend the position for 180 days to include a $1,000 bonus with an agreement if the person leaves early, and to reflect the COLA adjustment that position would have had,
and the step increase.
and the step increase.
And just a clarification, is the bonus contingent on the full 180 days or at least 90? It might not take 180 days to train everybody,
Yeah.
but we want to keep her for at least 90.
Will she stick around until you get the replacements and try to get them trained up,
Yes.
contingent on her finishing the job that you've asked of her?
Okay. It's just if it's contingent on 180 days, but it takes less, I didn't want the bonus
Yep.
to go away.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll make it by the job.
Thank you.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, motion passes.
Thank you, board.
Item 2, approval of FY24 reclassifications and salary increases with our HR department. Sylvia?
Alrighty, what I have before the board is the fiscal year '24 reclassifications that were approved through the budget process. These reclassifications would go into effect October 8th of 2023. And the reclassifications had gone through the HR Korn Ferry job evaluation process, were proposed to the board and to the departments we were working with, and with the budget approval, they were approved. So we're asking for the board to ratify that. What we do is then we do that spreadsheet with their pay, showing this is where they were and this is where they're going with that reclassification. And then we also have found, after we distributed the worksheets to departments on their fiscal year '24 increases, that we had some corrections that we need to make, and there's about 10 individuals we needed to show their appropriate pay rate. Oh, there's more than 10? Oh, wait, there's more than 10. Sorry, there's more than 10 that had some corrections related to it. My copy didn't print. But it's something to represent them on their correct step. Some had the correct step, but not the correct amount on the spreadsheet. So we're asking for that correction to be accepted by the board.
All right. And then if we could, in the future, get the full documents, because it's hard to, because our sheets only show 10.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mine did too.
we
when I
didn't have it
connected.
until this morning.
Oh, so
sorry.
we need to
Okay.
send it
So,
to the
yeah.
board. Okay.
Yeah, if you just wanted to get that to us.
Yeah,
that'd be
as
great.
we're on, navigating this on-base transition, we're having some difficulties that we still need to work with IT. And right now, we're adding the new documents to your PDF files, your on-base file is not working on our side, so we're still working with them. So we'll give you hard copies of those until we get that all rectified.
Okay. Questions?
I trusted this won't affect the budget at all.
Pardon?
It won't affect the budget.
No, we may have to draw from the account that we have contingency for salaries.
I don't think I've seen this list of corrections. Which one is it?
We sent it to you on Thursday?
Is it the longevity ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some that we had to recalculate their longevity. And then some had their appropriate step, and they're in New World, correct, but our spreadsheet had the wrong
The
amount.
what is in New World is what got budgeted.
Right.
So
Okay, then
my
we're good.
records match what's in New World. Now,
Right.
the longevity changes those are the other ones.
Yes.
So those ones will have a slight budget impact, but I'll have to calculate it and we can pull it from the mid-year wage pool.
I mean, we should do what's right, but I was just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, you have to pay the employees what you have to.
These spreadsheets and everything is so manual intensive. I mean, from the auditor side, our side, and, everybody did their checks and balance, but you're still gonna miss some. And actually, considering the number of employees we have, this isn't too bad. you know, we'd love it 100% to be accurate, but we did have a few things that needed to be adjusted.
Okay. All right. Anything else? No? Okay. Motion?
I move that we approve the FY24 reclassifications and salary increases.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right. Motion passes. Item 3, countywide proposed step anniversary criteria. And Sylvia.
Okay, at yesterday's elected officials meeting, there was discussion about the proposed step anniversary criteria. And from that, I tried to draft where we were going and some additional considerations and decision items, because no decisions were finalized yesterday. It wasn't a decision item on the agenda, so today, the purpose of today is to finalize that criteria, because we need to be able to, if we need to withhold step increases from individuals, it's in the pay period starting 9/24 that we would have to do that, so that's in a few days. So overall, pretty much everything stayed the same, except written reprimand went from more than one written reprimand to a written reprimand. And then the additional considerations, decision items for the board to make, and there was significant discussion, was number 1, under the heading of additional consideration decision items, that indicate for fiscal year 24, performance improvement plans and written reprimands issued in fiscal year 23 will not disqualify an employee from a fiscal year 24 step anniversary. An employee will not be eligible for a step anniversary increase for the following issued performance factors in 23, and that was last chance agreement, involuntary demotion, or suspension without pay. That was one of them, so I don't know if you want to discuss these items and say yes, no, or how you'd like to proceed with that. We also had talked about employees will not be eligible for a fiscal year 24 step anniversary increase if they are issued documented performance, any of the 5 items at the beginning of the document, performance. If something happens in 24 and their step anniversary is after that, they would not get their increase. If I understood that correctly, and I did go back and watch the meeting to try and work through this. And then there was significant discussion about written reprimand versus written warnings. And also the sheriff's office had brought up if there were incidences that occurred in fiscal 23, but they're still not concluded and they roll into fiscal year 24, how will those be handled? And those are lots of discussion needed.
I can answer the last question. I would propose that it be when the document is issued, and not when the event occurred, nor when it was identified, but actually when the disciplinary action was taken.
Board?
All right. Thoughts on that, Bill?
No, I think it's laid out here pretty well. And I think you captured what we talked about.
Okay.
The only other issue is just what are we doing with this written warning? Because that seemed to kind of conflate things a little bit.
Right. So I don't know if, well, apparently in the past, the written warning has been provided as a formal notice of unacceptable behavior, whereas the written reprimand was more like a discipline. So,
My inclination is that if you're writing up employees, that the step will, they're precluded from the step.
okay. So we can work on the policy to make sure that it's very clear going forward.
So in the 5 sub-bullets that I have at the beginning of the document. Do you want me to reference it written reprimand / written warning, and then we get rid of that language in the policy, or?
You can just make it written warning or reprimand and just leave the written warning in the policy if you want. I mean, again, when you're starting to document writing things up, to me, again, that is the beginning of the exit process. That they no longer are listening to the verbal guidance that they're given. Depending on how serious the issue is, you may just want to go right to that. But again, it's you've already exhausted your verbal, remedies.
Okay, Sheriff?
Yeah, are we revisiting things that I thought we resolved yesterday?
Well, they have to make that final decision, and some of these things were not resolved, so it was incumbent upon me to bring them back to the board for them to make the final decision.
And I want to clarify the difference between the documentation that Commissioner Matari is talking about and documenting a verbal warning. So they're two different things. One is we had this conversation, that's documented. The other thing, what he's talking about is these are steps towards behavior or termination. So that's what the difference would be there. So if I talk to one of my employees and just say, hey, don't be late again, then I could just send an email, hey, we talked this morning about, let's not be late. Although that's written, that is not considered a written reprimand or a written warning. That is a documentation of that verbal conversation. Whereas I think, Commissioner Matari, and please step in, is where he's like, okay, we had that verbal conversation. Now you've been late 2 more times this week. Now I'm going to have to actually write you up, and you're going to sign it, and it's going to go in the file. Does that make sense?
If I may, Commissioners, under Sheriff Nelson, for the record, if I could include that then, because just what you spoke to is what we refer to as performance log entries. And that was what we originally going with. If we had our own measurables, which we're going to discuss, if we can include that next to it says verbal warnings and performance log entries, because it's a documentation of a discussion or, if you will, a warning we had. If we can include that in there as not as a disqualifying factor, I'm okay with that.
Well, and I almost wonder if we leave this alone, because it actually references KCSO has their own additional proposed performance, and then you would just put it in that.
Okay, and that's fine. I just wanted to put that, and we're on the same page. When you were explaining it, that I was understanding it then. I just want to
Right.
make sure, because that is what the form that we use, the performance log entry.
Right. So Darren, do you have an issue with putting it in their separate document, or you need it in the county document?
No, that's sufficient.
Okay?
That's my understanding of the sheriff's office hiring practice.
Yes.
Sounds like everyone's on the same page.
Okay. And what exactly do you call that? A performance log entry? Okay. All right. So I am fine with the document as the new document presented this morning, and
Just adding warning or reprimand.
well, so it says written reprimand, verbal warnings are not disqualifying factor.
Yeah, but that's verbal, but we have a warning in our policy manual, so we include that written warning or reprimand.
Okay, yeah, we can make that change.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and then I forget, do we take this to a business meeting as well, because it's a change to the personnel policy?
Well, go ahead, Darren, sorry.
You can approve it here.
Right, okay. That's fine. So, motion?
So is our number 1 and number 2 of the additional discussion items, do they represent what the board and the electeds had talked about yesterday?
I think so. Yeah, and then I guess we have to word the number 4 to say that the incidents, the date is considered the date of the disciplinary action.
Okay.
So what do we want here? Amended as discussed?
Yep.
I move that we approve the countywide proposed step anniversary criteria amended as discussed today.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Number 4, step anniversary performance metrics for sworn ops. Sheriff's Department, Under Sheriff Nelson.
Good morning, Commissioners. Under Sheriff Nelson. As discussed yesterday, but again, forgive me for bringing forward the same document that we submitted a few weeks ago. There was some work to be done in discussions. Obviously, the email that I'd received from Commissioner Matari asked for an evaluation of some estimated training hours, which is being calculated as we speak. But referring back to your discussion yesterday, if you'll allow me, if we're going to be or a matrix of our own is going to, measurable, excuse me, is going to be utilized for the Sheriff's Department solely, then I'd ask that you give me the opportunity to work with this document into the near future to establish something that we're all agreeable. As yesterday with this document that we just discussed, the criteria, it's a starting point. The one thing that I would like to extend again was referring back to what Commissioner Duncan has asked, and I know Commissioner Matari and yourself, Commissioner Brooks, have asked for the best product of our people in the field. In an internal analysis, I would concede that for someone to get their longevity pay, they would have to have their advanced certificate at that point. Currently, right now, we have one individual who's two or 3 hours, I believe, from college classes to get that. They meet the 15 years. So for that purpose of that alone, I would ask that if we consider that to have that measurable in place for them to get their their longevity pay at 15 years beginning, they have their advanced certificate, which is attainable. It's not easy. They have to put in the work, if you will. But that being said, with the one individual who currently sits a few hours short, we grandfather him in and start from this point forward, clean, if you will, that everyone knows what the rules are to proceed. That also goes back to the post hours. There's work to be done there in the sense that I believe if we're going to be held to these separate measurables, then I can work with that establishing a baseline for each side, if you will, or a holistic approach so that each deputy must be aware from a certain date that they're going to have to be held accountable for X amount of training in addition to the other things that take and apply the criteria for the discipline and things of that nature.
Okay, so for what I'm hearing is we're not there yet.
We're not.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, because obviously you and I have had discussions, and I know through email, the commissioners as a whole and I have had discussions. I believe there's a work to be done, but as stated yesterday, it's a starting point. And I'm not saying it's nearly ending. Yes.
Go ahead.
So, this is our proposal. We've been going back and forth with the HR and Commissioner. So this is our current proposal that we would like to go forward with.
Just out of curiosity, because I know it was mentioned before that with the short staffing, it's difficult to ask deputies to do training when you're so short-staffed.
It's difficult logistically to make it happen.
Yes.
Not to ask, we can ask them, but it's difficult
No,
to
I understand.
logistically.
So if you were at, above 95% on your staffing, what would be a reasonable number if you were considered fully staffed?
And that is a question you posed to me in the email. And again, the analysis is being done internally to find out what the average is for each deputy, both sides being jail and patrol,
Yeah.
to see if we can come up with a simple answer, if you will, one number that works both sides. Because again, I'd like to think that if we're going to utilize this on the patrol side, if in fact we establish something for the jail side in the near future, we would have the same measurables that would be equivocal to both sides. So if you'd allow me the time to come up with that number, and again, just like you stated yesterday, this was a work or something to start from. I'm just asking, this is allowing me to work towards something in the near future, and I'm not trying to kick the can, something to work towards so we can establish that number so that everyone is striving towards something and not simply checking
Yeah.
the boxes if it's gonna be required of us.
Yeah. And how many high liability subjects training would you see to be a reasonable number?
Vehicle pursuit, lethal
Use of
weapon.
force. So at least, I would say 5 to 7.
Right, correct.
So if we put 6, just splitting the baby as a minimum, would that be fair?
3, yes?
Yeah, you have to do 6 of these a year,
That'll suffice, Commissioner.
so at least we have a number. The 20 hours, it's basically it's half a week. If you did 80 hours, that's 2 weeks. I think that's too much for post-training, But I would be curious if there isn't a way to get a couple more hours each year with a fully staffed department.
I think this is a good starting point, and we could revisit this in the future, but I think from going from 0 measurables to a set of measurables, that this is a good starting point, and then we build on it from there.
Yeah. Because that was kind of the contingency of, or the condition of, getting all the pay, was that we were going to be able to develop something that would be kind of the prize, if you will, for, the community, that, hey, we're going to start paying people correctly, but in exchange, we're going to, you're going to get this in return, so.
And I think my deal too is rewarding high performers. So people who have gotten their degrees and stuff, they're kind of left out of this, the way the original draft was presented.
Well, the
And so-
unfortunate thing is, for the job requirements, unlike some other agencies, a degree is not required. Per post, you're required to have certain training hours, which in your first years can be applied towards college. But until we make that leap of requiring it, I see that as, yes, I understand what you're talking about. You have those who've gone and received higher education, but it's still not a job requirement for the specific position.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying if you're gonna make max it at year 5, then I think that, having some other certificate would be nice, because then you have somebody year 5 with, nothing, making the same as somebody year 14 who has their bachelor's degree.
But they're
And-
not, based on the requirements from post, where they have to get either training hours and/or college credits to equate to both. So to say that they're not doing anything, yes, you can go and get your degree, but between the post, if you will, how they equate it to all, you have to have a certain amount of training hours and/or college equivalent hours to get to an intermediate or advanced.
Yeah.
As I expressed earlier on, to have someone get an intermediate by year 4 is far from attainable for most people because of the time, the money, and also the staffing.
But
It's
on the
not
flip
linear.
side to that, we've had people that have had master's degrees that don't apply to be a training officer, don't apply to be a school resource officer, don't apply to be on the traffic team. And so we have found that certifications are, in certain fields, are important to the organization, more so than a degree per se. Sure, degrees are important. However, I need them to perform while they're on the job also, not just to get the job.
And I would concede, the 20 hours is something that I'm willing to work with, again, based on the internal analysis that's being done by our training right now, to find out what the average deputy with our current staffing, both on the jail and patrol, to see where they're at. It may be several hours more, and then we can set the bar from that based on our current staffing as it is in the jail with so many openings, but not so many is equal on patrol. So I think there's merit in just giving me the opportunity to work with this. This was a living document as of yesterday because the issue with regards to the discipline and everything
Right.
was still in the mix.
And that's fair. I'd like to look at, the intent of revamping the matrix and the pay was to get the sheriff's office fully staffed. So with a full staff, what would that criteria be?
And I totally agree with
so
you, and I
that's how I would
totally
look
agree
at it.
about getting people to perform at the highest honest days work for an honest day's pay. The unfortunate thing is there's some things that I have to admit to. As of yesterday, a former agency that I am quite familiar with outside of the area is paying $60,000 signing bonus because of the shortage of law enforcement. So some things we can't control, then you add that with the housing market and things of that nature. I agree, we can set the measurables to what they are, so we get the best of the people we are currently have and the ones we currently are tending to hire. It's just a matter of getting to that point right now with this living document.
Yeah.
So then, my question to Brandy, legal, HR, I mean, I'm not comfortable approving anything today because we're still working on stuff. So what do we do now? Because this is like the drop dead date of,
So a
Moving
question
forward.
I had, is, does this go into effect fiscal year 24 and they've got to meet it? Or do the majority of the people already meet this, that they get their step in fiscal year 24?
This right,
Can you repeat the question?
So do your employees meet this criteria already? Have they completed 20 hours of high liability training, those sort of things? Or are we saying they get their step without any conditions except the performance things that the board just established, but all these other items they have to be working on them in this fiscal year, and it might affect their fiscal year 25 step increase if it's budgeted?
So we believe that the interpretation is we absorb everybody where they're supposed to be, and then this matrix starts from there.
Okay.
So in FY '24,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we just need to know today. And if this isn't gonna be approved today, then I think the deputies are just gonna get their steps automatically, like everyone else in the county. So essentially, if we're not approving any additional performance metrics for deputies, then they just are gonna get their steps automatically, like the rest of the county. That's kind of what, does that make sense? So for that's our
Yeah.
question for FY
Right,
'24.
so the only factor imposed on the officers who are under the 5-step matrix would only have to meet the performance, no documented performance criteria in fiscal year 24. And that, as of October 1, they've got to start getting their post-training. They have to get their liabilities training 6 minimum, and of course then meet the performance issues as well. I think we just need clarity there so we know, and for Marcia too, to tell us, okay,
Right.
these people get the increase, these
So we
may
actually
not.
have a meeting with Marcia and IT and payroll later today, because we were gonna wait to see what you said. So, every deputy has an anniversary date in FY '24. Let's say somebody's anniversary date is December 15th. By December 15th in FY '24, if he hasn't met these requirements, he doesn't get his step? Or are you saying this isn't getting approved, so for this fiscal year, they're just gonna get their steps like everybody else? That's what we need to know.
Keep reconciled.
I have a proposal on that, because there's so many big changes, and we don't want to be in a situation where people get penalized because we've implemented something that they couldn't have been preparing for. The other fact is that we seem to be, to me, the area that might make more, and maybe Commissioner Duncan, you might think the same or a little differently, is on the post hours. Is there a way that we can get the post hours to go up? Because it's easier to come down, but not necessarily go up. So what if we did something along the lines of the post hour requirement kicks in on FY '25. You're short-staffed right now. So to ask for the burden of people to put in extra time in while you need them, I think would be too much. And just start the post hours in 25. 26 it goes up to 25, 27 it goes up to 30. And by that time, hopefully you will have filled your ranks, and that something like that could be achievable. Would that be reasonable, at least to start with?
extremely so. And again, I could have the numbers this afternoon based on, again, the average of our current staffing in jail. I'm just thinking, if you will, the holistic approach. I'd hate to think we have one matrix set for the patrol side and not the jail side, if in fact we do some movement on the jail. So I would like to look at the approach of a holistic and say this is applicable to everything. I would agree that based on the early analysis, it could easily be higher than the 20. It's just a matter of understanding the parameters, and once we get it, then we can have that discussion to move forward each year.
As far as the 20 for FY '24, I mean, Brandy brings up a good point. If your step anniversary is the end of October, there's no way that someone could have had 20 hours worth of post-training, and they're going to get dinged for that, which I don't think would be fair.
Well, I would say it'd be in their last 12 months.
So that's another.
Yeah, but their last 12 months from October 15th of this year may not.
From last year.
So is the post hours within the fiscal year, or is it just within 12 months of their anniversary date? Because we wouldn't tell somebody, I assume, you need to get 20 hours between October 1st and October 15th. We would say, you need to get 20 hours between October 15th this year and October 15th next year. So I'm assuming these requirements are within 12 months of the individual's anniversary date.
Correct. That's where I would,
Okay.
I would say so.
I think that's an easy, and even between that time, we could have a discussion to modify this to, if it's gonna be, like you said, it's easier to go down, but if it's gonna go up based on the analysis that we've done, I have no problem with that. The only issue I have is if we're gonna go retroactive, the people that didn't know they're gonna have this
Yeah.
requirement placed upon them for a potential raise, I think that's somewhat unfair, but I understand the total grounds of moving forward and setting the parameters so they know what they're playing by.
You know, for the sake of moving this along, I would be okay if we just modified the language that the 20 post hours begins FY '25. That means FY '24, they have to start getting their hours. FY '26, again, for the sake of discussion, until the undersheriff can get his numbers together, it goes to 25 hours, and FY '27 and beyond is 30.
I don't know that we can even do that. So, I mean, just going forward today, and then if we choose to increase it later, that's fine. I don't,
I'm just trying to
How are we
set a
gonna do that?
bar so that
Well,
we
I
don't,
understand.
so that we don't have the creep, if you will, that we're having a goal where we're trying to get to.
well, for me, it's, we can do this next budget season and have a better document for this going forward.
Next budget season.
Yeah, so meaning next May, we could have your increase in hours. Isn't that what you're saying? Every single year you,
Well, what I was trying to do is just get to a peak so that, you know, the staff doesn't feel like we're shifting the goalposts on them, you know? So next year, it's like, oh, we've increased that. The year after, we've increased that, because I think at some point that leads to, you know, people wondering, are you trying to make this too difficult for me to get to my next step? And I've found that the more you can at least set the high bar that's coming down the pike, people will accept that and know that that's where we're going towards, as opposed to the every year it seems like we're shifting the goalposts.
I understand that, but we don't even have numbers from the sheriff's department until later today. So, I mean, and what about the longevity pay? I mean, that's not even in this document, right? So we would need to add the longevity pay in this document as well. I mean, I'm kind of sad because I think you guys brought this forward months ago, and I think we should have been a little bit further along than at the 11th hour.
With all due respect, Commissioner, you and I have had conversations through Sylvia, and then I brought the board. I agree that, goes back to the agree to disagree. We were going back and forth with various things. Again, I conceded to you this morning to allowing to have an advance before they start their longevity pay. Obviously, that's not a consideration because we're not speaking to that, but originally, longevity pay wasn't in this matrix.
I
or
know,
this
but
measure.
I added it this morning. So, yeah, I mean, I pretty much copied and pasted for most of the other stuff, but added the advanced certificate for the 15-year longevity pay. So, and then lateral deputies, we haven't even talked about them. So, how are they going to move in with this too? So, I'm not sure what the answer is, Bruce, because this is really not a great situation to be in at this point.
Well, I think it's a simple amendment, what you added for longevity pay, that they must have an advanced certificate within 15 years. I think that's a simple amendment.
Well, and then we also have to change the language on step 5 to voluntary career progression plan, so it doesn't sound like a voluntary improvement performance plan. So we want to make sure that that's really clear.
I believe it, the one I have is
Yeah.
acceptance of a career development plan.
Okay, yeah, then I don't have that one. See, we don't even have the latest.
There is one copy apparently up there or 2 copies up there because we got them this morning from Brett. It should say, number 5 should say acceptance of a career development plan.
Yeah, I didn't have that, so.
Okay. It wasn't in here.
So I think like for us to move forward, I think the sheriff's office has validated that anybody eligible for the 15-year, 25-year longevity pay meets it except for one that they've asked to be grandfathered in. So that gives Brandy and I, if you guys approve that, direction to, and payroll to say, okay, these individuals that, and it was budgeted without knowing any of this, so it's already in the budget that they were getting it, that they met whatever criteria. That they would start that longevity pay 9/24 for the longevity pay. I think we just need to vote
It's-
on that.
Well, their anniversary
who-
date?
People who are eligible
Yes.
for longevity pay at the beginning of the year are starting the year on 9/24 at their longevity rate. There are people who hit their longevity date throughout the course of the year. And that's
then
part of my meeting this afternoon is we were planning to be consistent with how we're treating everybody else, those individuals going onto their longevity pay once they hit their longevity date, which is their higher date with the sheriff's office. And then their step date.
Their
yes.
sworn date, not their
Oh.
higher date, because we
Yeah, their
had
sworn
some
date.
that went from civilian status to sworn, so.
And
yes.
then they also get their step anniversary date. Some people, the step will occur before the longevity and vice versa, and that's just the
Yeah.
way
Yeah,
the cookie crumbles. Dates won't always
Yes,
align.
yes.
So that is what was budgeted. We budgeted for the highest amount. We budgeted for all of them to go to their steps, not knowing what was gonna happen with this criteria.
and then for laterals, there was discussion that laterals would come in at a step 4.
Depending on their 97%, which
Up
would be
to,
that.
yeah, up
And
to
with,
step 4.
with respect to training
based on-
hours, or I'm sorry, longevity pay for lateral deputies, it's time and grade with the county.
With this county.
So
Not-
they
not
wouldn't,
if
yeah.
I- You know,
But
I
they don't
came
bring
here,
their service from
No,
somewhere
they
else.
wouldn't
Correct.
get longevity pay, correct?
and I'll gladly
Okay.
add that to the document, but that was the discussions we had in the sense of having that, you know, it's time here committed to this county and the organization.
But the lateral would have to have at least 4 years experience to be brought over at the step 4.
Correct, because we're following the county policy of 97%.
Okay.
So why don't we just make these amendments and get it on the business meeting for next week?
We can do that.
Oh, you're not there?
Huh? Well,
Can we
it's,
do-
we're calling in, so
Okay.
it's just, it is what it is at this
Let's-
point.
Is that, Darren, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the most
Yeah.
prudent way.
Yeah, so I would say we're bringing back the revised document of their steps and the progression, but all of it would be effective, their 12 months starts October 1st, except for those performance things that were agreed upon
Correct, the
just a while
criteria.
ago, right? So we build that in and add the longevity pay and the information about laterals, the max they come in at is a step 4 based on their experience in years.
Now, are we gonna say in here that 20 post hours within 12 months of their step anniversary date?
Or sworn,
Or, well, it can't go
Anniversary
off
date.
the sworn anniversary date is only for longevity. Everything
Yes.
else is their step anniversary date.
Yeah.
Which their step anniversary date,
Most of them it's the same, but it's
Ties
not the
to-
same for everybody, so the differentiation is
Dated.
important. But I think that this should say, you can't just say annually, we need to know is if it should,
yeah.
I say within 12 months of the individual's step anniversary date, so that one person doesn't have 2 weeks, right, to get all the qualification. And then same for this high liability training, should it specify within 12 months of their, I just would like some sort of clarification in there, so payroll knows what that means.
I think it has to be step anniversary date, only because when people come in brand new, they need to have that year
Right.
before their anniversary date comes.
Agreed.
So, is that,
I'm just making notes. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, Commissioner.
So if those first 2 bullet points are clarified, that is to the advantage of the employee.
and the post-hours requirement begins FY '25.
Okay.
Yeah, they're tabulating them right now. So
Yes.
October 1, they have by September 30th, the 25.
Of 24.
24,
Before.
sorry, 24, they have to have had at least 20.
Well, wouldn't it be by their anniversary date in FY '25?
Yeah, but
Oh,
we,
Because we just said
Yes,
it
by
doesn't
their
start at
step
the beginning of the.
anniversary date.
Yeah, so it would be
Complicated.
by their step
That's-
anniversary
yes.
date in 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this mechanism applies to those who are on that 5-step new matrix.
Correct.
Okay.
To the one deputy who does not
The
qualify,
2 hours or, yeah.
are we able to grandfather that deputy in?
So when is that, you said the anniversary date's December?
I don't know of his anniversary date specifically. I just
Okay.
know that when we ran the numbers internally, he was the one that he only has an intermediate, but he's short a few hours. So the reality of it is I find it unfair that because if
Yeah.
we're changing the rules this late in the game, that we don't push forward.
I'm okay if we give them some amount of time to complete it,
Yeah,
some reasonable amount of time. Would that be fair?
that's what I was thinking.
So, grant it and then within
X
180
time
days,
period.
you have to do it.
So the only problem is you can't take it back. So what if, as soon as he gets those 2 to 3 hours, that he gets bumped up?
Then he'll get a written warning.
No.
Darren, can we take it from him if we make that a condition of his longevity?
Well, I'm hearing two different things. One was you wait and give the increase until you actually satisfy that requirement. Or provide the increase now or whenever the step occurs, the step increase, and you have some time to complete it if you don't take that pay away. So you can do that as long as it's presented to the employee up front. So it would just revert the pay back to the prior pay.
Okay.
Darren, I ask you just this in our discussions about disparate treatment. If the rules were changed late in the game, are we not treating him different than the rest just because he's not at that point yet?
So the disparate impact, so we would, it sounds like he's a he, but I don't know if he's over 40. That's, Brett, that's what we would look at.
Fair enough.
As long as the board provides objective criteria for everyone and doesn't treat people differently, then we really don't, that's not an issue.
But the other thing too is that this is a new policy that we're implementing, so we're trying to make it something where people aren't being penalized because of a new criteria that they weren't aware of.
So, to me, what sounds like the best idea is whatever the reasonable period of time is, set that period of time, hey, you have this much time to satisfy this requirement. And then if you, either you give the pay now and do that, or then you get your pay increase. And what the board could do is back pay it. So pay it to get it by how much time it takes. Back pay it, make him whole.
And I suppose we have an executive session on this. We could actually talk about that individual.
So
And get
just
that.
since back pay was mentioned,
Yes.
if this is a specific individual,
Uh-huh.
okay, but going forward, if whenever post, requirements are implemented, if a deputy does not meet the requirements for a step on his anniversary date and 3 months later he does, payroll cannot go back
No.
and give him, he has to
No.
wait until next year.
Correct.
I just want
correct.
that to be, that's like not possible for
Yeah.
us to do that all year long.
Yeah.
So unless it's in place by that step anniversary date, he has to wait until another year.
And one thing, I mean, it's all at the board's discretion, of course, but one thing that payroll always recommends, and HR as well, is just the retro pays, if we can minimize those,
Yes.
just the amount of work with Percy and everything else and processing, I think is,
Okay,
Ideal.
okay, thank you.
But really that one individual's, we should probably address that one separately.
Yeah, we can do that.
Deal with the policy now, and that's what's on the agenda,
Yes,
and then separately deal with that employee.
yep, we can do that.
All right.
Okay, so, all right, this will be brought before us. Hopefully, we'll have the perfected document before Tuesday, and then we can put it on the Tuesday business meeting agenda and get that passed. Okay. All right, moving on. We have a separation agreement. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061B.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. Back from executive session, is there a motion?
I move that we exit executive session 1B with staff to proceed as discussed.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. Public comment? Hearing none. 11:36, meeting adjourned. Thank you.